Hello, Hidden Gems. We have a very special guest today, someone I'm very grateful that trusts me and our community with sharing, because I know that it's taken you a lot of thought and it's been a big decision to know whether or not you want to come here today, Victoria. But I am here with Victoria Lewis, juror number 12 in the most recent Lori Vallow Daybell trial, where we saw justice for Charles Vallow, who Lori Vallow has now been convicted of conspiring to murder because of you and your fellow jurors, Victoria. So first off, thank you for your civic duty. You're fulfilling that service. Thank you. You and I have been talking a little bit behind the scenes, and I know this was not something you wanted. You have taken this very seriously. This was very emotional. Can you take us back to the very beginning, actually being chosen for this jury? What did you know? And were you surprised to have been picked for this jury in Phoenix?
Definitely. So first off, this is my first experience ever. I've never been summoned for a jury, so I don't have anything to compare it to. A lot of people have asked me what was my experience like, and I'm like, well, first off, I have nothing to compare it to. This was my one and only experience. And when I received the summons and the questionnaire, they gave this huge list of names. I want to say there was like 30 names on it. And you had to answer if any of the names were familiar to you. So I go down the list and I answered no. No name really popped out. Um, Trina K, her last name's K. And I was like, wow, that's my maiden name, but I don't know who Trina K is. I'm sure there's lots of us out there. Um, but no, none of the names I recognized. And then I probably had 3 questionnaires emailed to me as time went. And so I was like, well, I must be getting close because I keep getting more questionnaires. But then when I showed up for the selection, there was like hundreds of people there. And I was just like, this is a waste of time. No way are they going to call my name. I mean, you're thinking, okay, 12 out of hundreds. What's the likelihood? And when they first called my name, I think I was number 30, 35 or 36.
Wow.
And then they started asking questions and more people were leaving. So I moved from like 36 to 12. And then the number 12 stuck with me, but there was even 2 people before me that was let go. So I was like the 10th seat. I was the first seat in the first row. And there's 9 behind me. Um, but yeah, I just kind of winged it and went through the experience, not knowing really the legal end of things. It was my first experience. So some of it I just felt kind of dumb, like,
What's going on? Yeah.
right. But yeah, it all came together.
And you
And
had you heard of Lori Vallow Daybell and just didn't know who she was, but you never even heard of her?
no, I never heard of her. And I'm going to be very honest and transparent. I'm not good with names. I'm not one of those people that will go watch a movie and say, go home and say so and so was in it and this was the actor, or somebody throwing
Right.
out at me saying, did you watch this movie with so and so? I'm like, you have to give me more than a name.
Right.
But I still, as I learned stuff, nothing popped up that seemed familiar. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, which is probably one of the reasons you became a juror, because that was something they were definitely striving for, little to no knowledge. And also I want to point out, like, this was a nearly all male jury, and
Yes.
here you were too. Sort of, we were all looking at you kind of like, oh, she's really representing a kind of a, she's really important because of the makeup of this jury. All of us sitting in the courtroom noticed you, because how could we not, if that makes sense, knowing how
Right.
many were male.
And I wondered that too. I was like, how were we chosen, and how, like, did they want all men? Like, I, are you discriminating against like, what is the deal? Like, I was expecting 6 women, 6 men.
That's what
So
is
it was
typical.
really strange.
I agree. That was really strange. And, when it comes to choosing the jury, the defense has a say, the prosecution has a say, the judge has a say. And so I can only speculate that Lori did like having men on the jury, but somehow or another you slip past.
Yeah. Yeah. I just kept telling myself it's how the cards fell, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's just a coincidence or whatever, and let them fall how they fall. But I did also think both of the prosecution and the defense had to agree.
they did.
So,
And
yeah.
and it could simply be that fewer men knew about Lori Vallow Daybell than women, right? It could be that their biggest focus was making sure nobody knew about this case, and that just happened to be mostly men and Victoria. Really,
But it's a man that was murdered. So wouldn't you know what I mean? Like,
Yes,
I could relate on the end of it as, thinking about domestic violence, thinking about she was extremely, I'm a single mom. Um, just going off of initially meeting her, she was very likable. She
mhm,
was charming, I guess you could say.
okay.
Like, my first vibe was not, well, until she started talking, was not, this is cuckoo.
Sure. No, yeah, she
So,
comes off very put together at first, right?
yeah, yeah.
And for an inmate, she looks, well, did you know she wasn't, I guess you knew she was possibly an inmate, but she's in her street clothes, her hair is done, her makeup's done, she looks,
I
what,
have,
put together, did you think? Or
well, yeah. So, a funny thing. So, several times during the trial, I kept having this dream that we went back in the next day and she had been beaten up. And so I shared that among the rest of us. And I was like, you guys don't make fun of me, but I keep having this recurring dream. I'm like, I don't know if she's in isolation. I don't know, like, what the
right.
deal is. And somebody was like, said, she's probably just in custody. And I said, well,
Mm.
I don't know why I'm having this dream, but I feel like she was jumped in jail and they beat her up. So I thought that was really weird. And it was funny, something to share for everybody to giggle at. But yeah, we didn't know if she was in custody, jail, what the deal was.
Yeah, could you guys tell if she was wearing a
That,
rack belt or a shock belt? Did you know that?
no.
Did you know
I
that until
noticed
this
she
moment?
was wearing the same things, like rotating her shirts, but wearing the
Right.
same.
Yeah, you noticed that. Same
Yeah,
suit, different day, right?
right.
Rotating. Um, but so yeah, and none of you could see that she was wearing this rack belt. underneath because
No,
she wasn't cuffed and she didn't have shackles on. So the judge ordered.
no,
She was not happy about that, by the way. The judge ordered,
really?
that she wear this rack belt under her clothes, which is a shock belt. And she argued that very much. She was not happy. And the judge said, well, it's what we're going to do.
Right.
So you can never tell.
No, I could
Yeah.
never tell. And she
Yeah.
was very, she had eye contact with all of us. She would smile, she would giggle, she would, and then after a while, you're like, this just isn't serious to her.
Hmm. That's interesting. So your take on that was she's not taking this seriously. This is
No, it was weird.
sort of this. Would you consider it nonchalant? That was a word that came up a lot in the
Just
trial.
the overall demeanor, the most emotion I saw from her was with her and Nancy Joe, and was it Serena, where she was being quite sassy and whatnot. Um, that was the most emotion. Oh, her opening, she did cry. Well,
Did.
I don't know if she literally had tears, but she appeared to get choked up when talking about Tylee,
Okay.
but
And you
never saw that again.
So did that resonate with you then when Trina K in closing arguments pointed that out? She cried in or in opening statements, but not when her husband died?
Definitely. And I'm a very emotional person, and I tend to have lots of empathy and sympathy. And when, like, I wasn't moved, but I don't know if
Mm.
these are the right words, but when she did appear to be upset, I mean, I just sat there and listened. It didn't like go through me, as when I sat and watched Kay and she broke down crying, I was holding back tears. I was going to grab the Kleenex, and I was talking myself through it. Don't show emotion, don't start crying, but I was literally shook up,
Okay.
and I could feel her emotions, where that didn't happen when Lori opened up with her little cry, or I don't know what it
AKA
was.
tears,
Yeah,
whatever it
yeah.
was. Her
So I
alleged
don't know if I
emotion.
was picking up, like, or just vibing that she's not, this isn't real.
You were
Like
catching
she's
something.
faking it. Like she's, maybe I was picking up on something. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you
Because
didn't even know
usually
why yet.
right. And usually when I see a person upset, I'm going to have empathy. I'm going to like feel something. I didn't feel anything.
Hmm. That's interesting. And that's probably really interesting to look back on. Like you said, you were a clean slate then, just paying attention, listening to each side. Huh.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And so then you left me with so many questions with what you're sharing, and it's actually so interesting to hear your perspective. But then beyond the opening statements, that alleged emotion that you saw, there wasn't much else except for with Serena and
I
with
mix up Serena and Christina. Christina, she didn't even cross examine, correct?
correct.
I thought that was weird. Why not?
Mhm.
Because she went
Do you-
hard on
Yeah.
Serena.
What I think is that sometimes these trials can be a bit of a game of cat and mouse. And if Christina didn't say anything that was too damning to Lori, she would recognize that and think, well, I'm not going to cross examine because then something else could be said by her that's then introduced into trial. And Trina K might be able to then redirect and something worse could come out. So I think I can't get into Lori's mind, but I will say sometimes when a defendant or defense attorney doesn't cross-examine, it's because they're thinking nothing they said was too damning. So we're just going to keep going.
But
But I
that's
agree with you. It was surprising she didn't. I'm with you. I was surprised that she did not cross-examine her.
there was so much though that Christina said. Christina's the one that brought up the drugging. Christina's the one that brought up the no repenting, that she knew all of the women from prior lives. Like
Yeah.
she brought up a lot. And I was kind of relieved that Lori didn't cross-examine her, because I can only speak for myself, but I felt bad for Serena. I thought that she was extremely nervous and did not want to be up there. Like, I would
Absolutely.
have felt really bad if Lori would have given her the same attitude that she gave to the others.
Serena.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she wouldn't have
Well,
been able to take it.
I also want to point out, I was gonna let's bring this up now so that people understand context. You were raised LDS, and so you understood that you didn't understand. Take your pick. You either understood what they were talking about, or you understood that you had no idea what they were talking about because of this background and understanding of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints from your childhood. Is that correct?
Yeah, and we were told that the LDS Church would be mentioned a lot through this trial, and one way or another, was that going to impact us? And I'm like, well, I was raised LDS, but is it going to impact me? Absolutely not. I was raised in the church, but there's a huge gap between me and my three older sisters.
Okay.
So by the time I was probably 10, they were all married and out of the house. My parents bought a second home in Pine Top, and we would commute every weekend back and forth. And when I didn't have school, we were at the cabin. So I wasn't an active member. But my whole family is LDS. I'm very familiar. Um, and as an adult, I choose to go to a non-denominational Christian church. My ex-husband is, just to make sense of all of this, my ex-husband is Black from the South and was raised in the Bible Belt.
Okay.
Me being raised in the Mormon church, it made sense because that was a happy medium.
The non-denominational
Yeah,
Christian church. Yeah. A
right,
blended faith family. It made sense for both of
right.
you. Yeah.
But do I have any judge? I'm very open-minded. I love culture. I love people's different beliefs. I always tell people it's not our place to judge. They will be judged later by someone much greater than us. So that's just how I live my life.
Yeah. Well said.
But
I concur.
with people's different beliefs, I say that meaning that that makes the world go around. We all have our different beliefs. But I'm a strong believer those beliefs should be based on love. This
Yes.
stuff that was going on with Lori was not based on love. Regardless of my knowing of the LDS Church, this was not right. And
Right.
that was me not knowing the other stuff. That is pure evil. But this is just me with the facts that I was seeing in this trial, the text messages I was reading, the behaviors. It was all like, this isn't right. And
Yeah.
I struggled with that because I'm so not judgmental, but yeah, I'm put in a position where I have to judge. I have to say guilty or not guilty, and I really struggled with that.
That makes sense because your whole life your slogan for life is don't judge. It's not our issue. You do you. And all of a sudden they're saying your job is to judge this woman, to be judge and jury, literally. Yeah, that would be
And
difficult.
and I support the verdict. Absolutely, and especially knowing what I know now. But it was still a very hard process to put myself in that position, or to have I didn't put myself, but to have myself in that position. It was difficult because she's human. She's another, and
Yeah.
I really struggled with going, okay, I know how I feel and I know the evidence that I'm looking at, but how do I correspond this evidence with the law? Like
Mm.
how do I put together um all of this information and prove that she was planning this, which that's how I felt initially, until I kept seeing more and more evidence. And that kind of went, I had no problem with it after that.
Yeah, the evidence started out slowly and then it just became a snowball at the end. It was just
Fast.
um so understanding your faith background, you mentioned Serena and how she got a little. I'll let you describe how you thought she
Nervous.
acted
Yeah.
with cross-exam with Serena, but it was almost there was a lot of religious sort of argument during that
Right.
cross-exam too. So what did you think then watching Lori cross-examine her once friend Serena and what they were discussing?
I thought she was nasty to her. I mean,
Yeah.
but the thing with Serena, she didn't appear nervous. It was Christina. I'm mixing them up. Serena stood her ground. She heard what she heard, and she wasn't gonna pedal backwards
About the zombies. She heard
about
about
the
zombies. Yeah.
zombies, the being translated,
Translated. Yeah.
um, about the evil spirit within Charles named Ned,
Mhm.
about all of the stuff that she heard at these get-togethers, events, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah. She stood her ground. You're right.
She did. She didn't waver. And
Yeah.
then, of course, Lori's big thing was, did you see me planning this, or did you hear me planning this? And of course, it was no, no, no. She said that with almost every person.
Mhm.
And I was like, she must be saying this that's when I was like, she must be saying this for a reason. So how do I put this evidence together with the law? Which all came
Mm.
together at the end, because the closing argument, Trina was excellent. I mean, it was long and detailed, but I needed that. She literally pointed out everything and matched it to which law it applied to. There was
Yeah.
no question after that.
Right. Right.
Give
I
give
thought she did an
me
excellent job with.
give me a defense after that. And that's what I struggled with, is I get that Lori's innocent until proven guilty. Um, she doesn't have the burden to prove her innocence, but give us a defense.
Yeah.
I felt like that went to her head and she just felt like she didn't need to do anything. Give us a defense.
Her defense was saying, "I don't need a defense, right, everyone? Right, everyone?
Right,
I don't need a defense."
right, right.
But you're saying you needed more. You said you wanted more.
Especially on her crosses, when she points out certain things, well, you have an opportunity now to go back and pull evidence to support your statements, and you're choosing not to. Why?
So in other words, you're listening to her statements, you're willing to give her statements credit, but you would like evidence to back them up. You're not just gonna take them at face value. You're saying, "I'm listening to you, Lori, so show us the evidence that backs them up," and she
Yeah.
never did that.
Yeah. She, the little white lies, I'm like, if she's gonna lie about not running out of the house and not having shoes on, but then clearly in a video showing she had shoes on, my first thought was maybe they were in Charles's car and maybe they're his flip-flops or
Okay.
slides.
You're really
We
giving her the benefit of the doubt then.
we
Yeah.
zoomed in. Those
Mm,
shoes fit her better than the Walgreens shoes that she bought
mm.
that appeared to be too big.
So you guys really focused on this. You guys, and you're giving her the benefit of the doubt. Benefit of the doubt. Maybe they're somebody else's shoes, but
In
you're
my
saying,
gut, honestly, in my gut, I felt she was guilty, but I was focused on the law. I was focused on, I can't accuse somebody being guilty if it doesn't follow A through Z.
mhm.
So for my conscience, I really, it was the details.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That's makes a lot of sense to me. A lot of
She,
logic.
she mentioned, the text messages being misunderstood. Did we know that her brother was a comedian? Well, could you make us understand if we're misunderstanding and misreading these text messages, please give us something. And she wouldn't give us anything.
Make it make sense. Make
Right,
this help us understand. We're listening.
right,
But how is this a joke? How is this Nephi text
right.
a joke? You will be like Nephi, or I'll be like Nephi. Yeah. Which, by the way, Nephi, that was a big part of Nephi really made an appearance in this trial.
Yeah.
You know about Nephi growing up LDS.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's cartoons. That, you know what I,
Right. The living
you,
scriptures or whatever. Yeah.
right. You learn it as a child. But what really got me about the whole Nephi thing is the text messages are black and white. Okay. She, from her mouth, is texting, I am of Nephi, and soon you will be too, to her brother. Can you say premeditation?
Right. Very
So
black and
if
white. And
I'm
she's a very literal person herself. So
right,
it's hard. Yeah. I mean, she's so literal. Lori's so literal. She's saying, if I didn't say this to you, Serena, then it didn't happen. And yet she's trying to then say that this text that she sent, that's, as you point out, very black and white, maybe is more nuanced. And you're like, show me. Like, hell, and
right.
it's not.
What
Yeah.
is the mission? What was the mission? What are we misunderstanding? In black and white, we have these words. Explain. No, you don't have to. You're innocent until proven otherwise. But have a defense. Give me something to put doubt in my, you you're not giving anything. You're arguing about chicken enchiladas and stuff that has nothing to do with um
The issue at hand.
supporting you as, yeah.
Speaking of chicken enchiladas, what did you think of her? Well, first off, what did you think of her brother Adam's testimony?
um it was damning for sure. I mean, I got a really good vibe from him. I want to laugh because I was going to say he was hot. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking.
This is why they had a female on the jury right here. Here you go.
Love his voice.
Yeah.
No, seriously. um, yeah, he had a lot to say, and it was all very, very important stuff. He knew what was going on. He
Mhm.
knew that things were not right. why is his brother not responding to him when he clearly said he could stay with him?
Yeah, why is Alex not responding to
Yeah.
Adam? Yeah.
And why? Because he's with Lori planning something.
Mm-hmm. Right. Which is to
So,
kill Charles. Yeah.
yeah.
Right, to have a family
I
member
felt
testify.
really, he got choked up when he spoke of like finding out in Tucson. And just like with Kay, I felt those emotions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I definitely had sympathy. Um, and after they both testified, I knew where they were sitting in is it called the gallery?
Mm-hmm.
They were always in
Yes.
the front row.
Yes.
I was I found myself making eye contact with Kay. I mean, I wanted to hug her. I felt for them.
Yeah. You understood. Did you not understand who she was before her testimony and then
No.
after? Yeah. And
Right.
then after you understood.
Right.
Did you know everybody else who was sitting on the front row? Did you know who they were? Or
No.
you just had to
No.
kind of, yeah. Kay
I
testified. You
thought
understood that.
I thought that maybe the gentleman next to her was maybe her husband, Larry. Is
And it was
that
actually Jerry
and
Vallow.
it was the
Yeah.
brother,
Brother of
which I
Charles.
learned later. But
Yeah.
I was guessing that
Sure.
they all were family or relate something.
Absolutely. Yeah. And did you know that you probably didn't know that that was Lori Vallow's son that came a couple of times as well, her only surviving child that was there.
No, and I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
But I didn't know. I kept
You didn't know.
wondering. I kept looking for Tylee, who would be an adult now. We're what 6 years later. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I kept wanting to hear from her.
And a lot of us in the gallery and those of us reporting on the trial, we're wondering what the jury that each individual juror was wondering about Tylee. So it's interesting to hear that question. That was something I would go out at lunch sometimes and report live, and everybody wanted to know your reactions, which you guys did very well with your poker face. I didn't have much to ever really report, but minus they're paying attention. But that was a question many of us had is what were you thinking about Tylee? Like clearly Tylee was a witness in this alleged murder. Now we can say murder, but during the trial, alleged murder. And
Why would they not call her?
yeah,
Well, and I also really felt like, now, granted, she was a child, a teenager at the time, but I just kind of felt like she was involved too in a part of it.
yeah, it's
Like,
heartbreaking to think what her
yeah,
mother
had
coerced her to do.
brainwashed her with.
I will say that during her interview, which Lori wanted to show and couldn't because she couldn't use someone she's convicted of murdering as a witness. It's a very sad interview to watch. We've watched it and she cries and tries to hold back her tears. She hums a song from Moana. She cracks almost nearly every joint or, in her body. The song from Moana that she sings has the line, "I wish I could be the perfect daughter." And she's humming it. It's very sad, um, what she knew or didn't know, um, and seeing a little 16-year-old in that position. It's very sad. And yeah, confusing, I'm sure, to have listened to that
Yeah.
evidence. I have more questions from trial, and I also know that you have notes, but because we're on the topic of Tylee, when did you find out about Tylee, and what were your
Immediately.
thoughts? Immediately after the
Immediately.
verdict?
Yeah.
When I saw
No,
you outside. Go
when
ahead.
I say immediately, I'm talking just like headlines of that happening. Did I have the story behind it? I didn't. I did that later. But the headlines clearly said what she was already convicted for. Did I have the gross details? No.
So so in other words, take me back that the verdict's been read by all of you. You go back to meet the judge. And is that when you Google on your phone or did the judge tell you? How did you
No.
learn?
So we went back to the judge, then we were told that we were excused. I was even more confused because not knowing this whole process or this being my first experience, I'm like, what about the sentencing? Why don't we get to stay for the sentencing? Why don't, and so we were put back in the jury room and he said, don't leave yet. I want to come back and personally shake everybody's hands, which he did. And when he came back was when he mentioned, you can now talk about the trial, but I advise each of you to get on your phones. And I don't know if he used the word Google, research, whatever. Um, Wait, though, I'm trying to figure if this was before or after I asked. So he came back in to shake our hands, and maybe he says, "Does anyone have questions?" And I said, "Yes." Why? I'm confused. Why don't we get to stay for the? Why aren't we in there for the sentencing? What is the result of the guilty verdict? And he said, I think he said 27 years to life. But then he said there's another trial and she will not be sentenced until after the next trial, and that we're more than welcome to come back for that. I was like, what? And
You
that's
really had
all
no
we were
idea.
given.
You had no idea. And is that when you Googled on your phone?
Yeah.
And what were the headlines you
As
saw?
soon as there's just like, it was never ending.
So what did you see that said Tyler? Did you just Google Lori Vallow Daybell or
Lori, yeah, that's all I
Lori Daybell?
Googled.
I know
Yeah.
she's got two
And
last
it's
names.
just crazy. I did
So
the Vallow Daybell.
okay.
I
And
didn't
you see
think
what?
to like separate them.
What headlines are you looking at?
That she was found guilty for killing her kids, and somebody, and
Tammy
Tammy, who
Daybell.
I didn't, yeah, it didn't ring a, it wasn't like immediately. The thing that just was so devastating was the mention of Tylee and JJ being murdered. That's hard to just, first of all, hun, I live in a bubble. I don't like drama. I have a very tight, close, I don't have like a ton of friends, but if you if you're close to me or considered family or friend, um, it's tight.
Yeah.
I don't do that loosely. I don't um I'm a mortgage underwriter. I work insane hours. I work around, the clock and trying to always be available. Um, so if I'm not working, that quality time with my two kids that I'm still needing to raise is so valuable because I realize from my grown kids how fast that time goes.
Yeah.
And so I always make, even at work, I make a joke. Why am I always the last to know? Well, Victoria, it's because you live in a bubble. Like, if there's gossip at work, like, I didn't know this.
Just through, yeah, you're just
Yeah.
okay.
Why?
Yeah,
Why?
I know people like you. I know people like you. I'm one of the first to know. No, just kidding. I'm like, tell me more.
You're
I'm
so
here. But
you're so
you're just doing
cute.
your own thing. You have no idea. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so when you take in all of this afterwards, I had immediate anxiety. I kind of felt like I was a little bit having a panic attack. It was overwhelming.
You were shaking when you came out of the
Yeah.
courthouse. I want to say I did come up to you. I got the last of your first interview, and then you and I spoke after. Admittedly, I was one of those journalists. People have called me out. You did this, Laura, and you went. I did. I went up to Victoria and the other jurors that were talking. You were shaking though. You were shaking. You. It was very clear you had just found something out, and I think that's why I'm asking you to tell me, because I am so curious what happened before you walked out, because you were physically shaking.
It was hard to process. So it was like you have this information, but you don't have all of the details behind it, but you just know it's awful. Um, the what ifs go through your mind. Like, what if it was a hung jury? What if,
Yeah.
not knowing all of this stuff, what if, you know?
Yeah.
I felt
Yeah.
for Charles's family because, now I hear people saying that it's a waste of money for the state, this, that, and the other. Good for the state to give that family some justice and some peace. It
Yes.
is a life.
Yes. Charles
How,
mattered. Yeah.
yeah. And he seemed like a good, upstanding. That was another thing. She kept mentioning domestic violence. Why wasn't any history of this presented? Was there a history of this? Obviously, there's no history of this. So just this one single moment, he just lost it.
Right.
And if he did lose it, you're there prepared with a gun when supposedly you went golfing with this guy. He was your brother-in-law. You guys had a friendship. But now I'm going to shoot you because I feel threatened.
Right.
It doesn't make sense. Give me
No.
other information. I'm really mad now that I see that he filed something on Lori. Why wasn't that presented to us?
The body cam footage when he was saying
I think so,
yeah,
but
he was
wasn't there a
saying,
report too that they could have? I
go
don't
ahead.
know. I
I
just
mean, he
thought,
called police. He called police and said, I need
right,
help. And that's on
yeah,
body cam footage. He switched the beneficiary. That actually says
right.
something to me.
He admitted to Nancy Joe the dilemma that he felt obviously unsafe because otherwise, why would she have suggested that he let Lori know that she's no longer on that insurance policy?
Yeah.
So which was very smart and very, I mean, I wish somebody would have said that to him weeks earlier, for him to just, because if in his mind, obviously, he's thinking she's saying all of this threatening stuff and she would benefit from this. I need to tell her that she's no longer on it.
Hmm. Right. All of those things you're pointing out. Exactly. It just, none of it makes sense. And you're right. Charles, I think from the evidence, what we see with Charles is that he was patient. He was kind. I mean, that's what I see in the evidence, is what a good guy he is,
Right. Right.
Yeah,
So just extremely sad. And
very.
I could go on forever. I really think that that whole scene was staged within that, what, 40 whatever minutes before calling 911. I
I
don't
think
even
so
think he
too.
was shot where he was shot the first time.
Right. You think they
I
moved him
think he was
around?
moved and then shot the second time.
Hmm.
And what that's not self-defense. I'm sorry, but he's harmless after you shoot him the first time. What are you afraid of? That he might live?
So you think that Charles then, and I don't know, in the end, none of us will know. But we can all look at the evidence and assess. So you think he was likely that he was shot, his body was then moved, the scene cleaned up, the bat posed, and then they shot him a
The
second time.
shoes by the door, the hat thrown against the wall.
Yeah.
So if he snapped, and both of them are pretty good sized men, right? And they're
Mhm.
going to go at it, there's not going to be any other damage. That doesn't make sense. His watch was in perfect condition, not a scratch on it. The walls, I mean, I'm sorry, but there would be more than a scratch on somebody's head.
Right. I know.
And the only bruises he had was on his knees from most likely falling to his knees when when he was shot the first time, and he put his hand up to hold
I know.
where the wound was.
So sad. Was that
It
difficult to see those photos?
Yeah, I have never. I feel part of me, hun, really feels like a baby when I think back at it, because now I'm realizing the photos that the other juries in Idaho had to sit through. I I couldn't I can't imagine it. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was hard, but I also realized that what I experienced was minute to what went on in Idaho.
Yeah, the jurors in Idaho saw some horrendous things, but that doesn't discount that you did too when it came to Charles. Um, 2 very different trials, and I feel for every juror in every trial. Yeah. But yes, I sat through her Idaho trial as well, and it is horrendous what those jurors had to see.
So instead of going through, I mean, there's never ending documentaries when you Google her. What I wanted to I wanted to know being in this trial, I wanted to know the details of the other two trials. So I listened to Lori's, it was audio, no video.
You did
And then,
listen. You've
yeah, and
listened.
then
Okay.
his is both video and audio.
Mhm.
Um, I had to take a break. And that's, I feel bad. I put you off for weeks.
Okay.
Last week, I wanted to be like, I'm not watching anything. Kind of just threw myself into work, which I needed to because it was month end. Um, I can't get rid of the knot in my stomach.
Yeah.
I found myself waking up nauseous, going to bed nauseous, just being nauseous all day long because I think I internalize a lot of things and suppress. And I just thought it was to the point where it was unhealthy. I have time to, I still want the whole story and to put together the pieces, but I just need to give myself a break.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna keep my camera off for a bit, forgive me,
Okay.
since we're having a hard time, and I wanna focus on you. But, I, uh I can't imagine I didn't know that one of the next questions I was gonna ask you was what you've watched since that time.
I
So you
wanted
have
to
actually
be
delved
in
into it.
those trials and listen.
Wow.
Obviously I wasn't and couldn't and to know. about them, but I want to know the facts. Not that documentaries don't show facts, right? But after experiencing what I went through, I wanted to know what everyone else has experienced in the actual courtrooms.
Yeah,
So I went straight to that information.
I'm impressed. And I also know then what you heard and how difficult that is. And so not just Lori's trial, but also Chad's.
Yeah, both of them.
Anything that stood out to you the most?
Well, I went through, thank goodness, in Chad's, they didn't show the actual pictures that the jurors saw. Instead, they put them on private screens, they said, or something. They didn't have it on the big court screen. But I sat there and listened to all of the descriptions that the detective had to explain and describe, and it was really gross.
Yeah. Really gross. Yeah. Um, Shocking, appalling, heinous. I know.
I
It's
I
sick.
did see that she claims that this was all Tylee's doing. And then she explains that Tylee always wanted to be cremated, so she was. Not the same thing.
No, not at all. So did you watch her interview with her remaining son, Colby?
Yes.
Okay.
That was one outside of the trial. You know, like I said, there's a zillion documents and videos, but I I I think someone sent it to me, honestly.
Okay.
That I can't remember who it was. There was people I met while I was waiting for the shuttle, and there was a lot of media. I spoke to you, and there was two other. All of you guys knew each other, but she had my name and number, and she sent me some videos, and that was one of them.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I remember sending you a couple videos too, and
Maybe
so
it was you. I don't. Yeah, I
yeah, it
don't
might have even
know.
been my producer. I know you're in touch with my producer.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Um.
Yeah,
But yeah, I saw that, and I just feel for Kobe
I know. I
to
know.
sit through that.
I know, and I thought to show up at his mother's trial for even 3 days. I think it might have been 4 or 5. I don't know how many, so forgive me, but just to do that was a lot, I think,
Hmm.
you know, and to support Kay and Larry and the Vallows. Larry wasn't there, but Kay and Larry, you know, they're married, and then Susan Vallow and Jerry Vallow were there, and, there was actually a cousin of Tammy Daybell's that also showed up for a few days, Julie Brooks. And she also just happened to know Tylee and JJ and Charles and Lori. And then Ray Hermosillo was also there, Detective Ray Hermosillo for a couple of days. He is the one that discovered the children's remains. And I don't know if you know all of this, so I'm just telling you everyone that was in the front row at different
Right.
times, as well as other law enforcement from Idaho, Eric Wheeler. Um, those are a few of the people that appeared. Um, and then Lori's cousin Megan Connor was there sometimes, and then her uncle Rex Connor, although he wanted to sit with the prosecution, not the defense. Both of them did. And then, of course, Adam. So those are the people that showed up.
So her parents weren't there, her sisters weren't there, all
Mm-mm.
these people that she mentioned, why they weren't interviewed or why they weren't witnesses on behalf of her character or whatever, which she chose not to have either. But I was wondering, they were all absent.
So you did note that. Did you wonder where anybody was that was supporting her?
Yeah, once it came to realizing that it was going to go into closing arguments and she wasn't going to testify, nor did she have any witnesses, I had to scratch my head and be like, why? I get the whole you're innocent, but give me some type of defense. I get it's not your burden, but it is the prosecution's burden, and they did a pretty damn good job.
Yes.
So the ball is in your court.
Well said. Exactly. It's the prosecution's burden. They did a hell of a job. Take it away, Lori. Show us what you got. And
Right.
nothing. Yeah. Well said.
I really didn't, in the beginning, I was just, when we walked in and out, I would look at the ground. I didn't want to catch eye contact with anyone. Um, but then after Kay's testimony and me knowing who she was and that she was sitting there in the front, I then just started like visually looking at who was out there.
Mm.
And just watching her and her reactions.
Yeah.
She was very reactive until the end when we found her guilty and no reaction whatsoever, just stone faced.
Lori.
Yeah. But the whole time she had reactions to everything.
What were the reactions you're seeing? So this is interesting to all of us because
You saw the
none
back
of
of her
us could
head.
face Lori. Not even the camera
Except when
faced
she
Lori.
turned around to talk to
Right.
the, yeah.
If she turned around, we could see. If it was to the side, we could see. But really, the jury could see, and the judge and the court clerk and the recorder. So what were her reactions that you saw? What were her expressions during the trial?
She was flipping through her papers and making notes every time she heard something that she didn't agree with that Trina was saying. And she would be shaking her head. Um,
I did see the head shakes a lot, the shaking and
yeah,
and I could see frantic writing,
right.
Yeah.
And then she would like mouth things. I'm not a good mouth reader, so I just knew she was reacting. Um, Things that
Yeah.
she felt were nonsense, she would giggle and laugh and like it was a joke. I don't know. It was just strange behavior. Really strange.
It sounds like Lori. What we've seen. I mean, Lori is strange. So yeah, strange behavior. It sounds like Lori Vallow Daybell and what we've seen uh from her in the years past. So, but not emotional as far as sadness, but just
Yeah. Like I intentionally looked at her when they'd show the biopsy pictures or just the pictures of Charles in general.
Mhm.
No reaction.
Would she smile at you guys?
Yeah. I
Huh.
had eye contact with her many times.
And what would she do? Just look or smile
She'd
or
smile and it made me feel nervous. I would have initial contact and then I'd like put my head down or just look in a different direction.
yeah, right, because it made you uncomfortable. That's so interesting. Can you brought up
I figured
go
she
ahead.
was giving me a number and it didn't make me feel good.
Did you you brought up Kay's testimony a few times now. What did you think of her cross-examining Kay?
I just thought that was sad and she really didn't cross-examine her. I mean, it
Yeah.
was very short and it was the last sentence. Oh, when Kay kind of like snapped back and stood her ground.
Show about the evidence.
Yes, you could tell that it just totally threw her off. Like
Mm,
she just kept flipping through pages,
mhm.
and then her only comeback was, "Did you hear me or see me planning to kill my husband?"
Wow. Yeah.
And
Um,
which was her go-to.
right. And then Kay's response I thought was so well done. She said, "No, but I've seen a lot of
Of
evidence
evidence.
that you did." And
And
then
then
Lori
she
had
didn't
nothing else.
even like ask for it to be
No.
like she just was out of there.
Right. She was like, "Okay, well, we're done here. Moving on." No, I know it was a mic drop moment for me to hear Kay say that. That she did
Right.
a really good job. I was very worried for a very long time about Lori cross-examining Kay. I was nervous for Kay, and yet she did such an incredible
You
job.
could tell that that was the one and only time that Lori was nervous.
It's interesting. Yeah. Which you don't see a lot of when it comes to Lori.
She gave If Looks Could Kill when Serena got off the bench, and instead of walking around, she walked straight through the middle. Lori looked her up and down, and if you could see arrows coming out of somebody's eyes, Looks could
Wow.
kill. Yeah,
Wow.
that was intense.
That's so interesting to hear. Yeah, I thought that was interesting too because I do think that she was perhaps even threatened with Serena in their little friend group. As I've looked back and researched this, so just a little my analysis of it, that Serena was actually kind of pushed out of this friend group because I think Lori was always a little bit threatened by
Really.
Serena. Yeah, that's my take. That is purely my opinion and speculation.
Right.
To hear you say if looks could kill is really interesting. That's like a look we couldn't see. What other expressions like that? What did she Well, let me ask you what you thought about her cross exam with Adam, her brother. I know we've brought up Adam's testimony, but I was curious. You brought up the green chili
It
enchiladas. What
really
did you think
wasn't
about the
a
cross
cross.
exam?
Yeah, it really wasn't a cross exam. Like sometimes she'd go up there and say stuff, and you're like, where is this going? Why is this even relevant? Like it was just like a waste. Like I don't remember her saying anything to him that made you question something he had said, or made you like had there was no aha moment in her and then you're stuck on the green enchiladas, right? Because she spent more time on the green enchiladas than she did anything else
Yes,
there.
the green enchiladas. I wanted to ask you. I mean, that was a weird moment for everyone, right? It was weird for us in the gallery, but was that strange for the jurors to hear her
Yeah.
upset?
And I don't know, I think at that time I was starting to have some facial reactions because I think I found myself rolling my eyes and thinking, thank goodness the camera doesn't include us in the,
That was a moment where I could see a few
because,
jurors' reactions. Yes, that and then the cross with Serena, which is why I asked about it because it was sort of like this Bible bash back and forth.
well, and my most favorite thing was when Nancy Joe snapped back and said, don't flatter yourself. I was
I know.
like, please make a t-shirt that says that. I will be your first customer.
We have it.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah, we have it, and Nancy Joe now has one.
Well, I want her to sign one for me.
We will make that happen. We will make that happen. I'll talk to Nancy Joe. Yeah,
Yeah.
we have a t-shirt, "Don't flatter yourself" t-shirt. We
She,
had it. It was amazing, wasn't it? I was so proud of Nancy Joe for standing her ground.
yeah. And that had to have been hard. Could you even imagine? I mean, to be cross examined by her,
Yeah.
And then at that point, we didn't know about the her and Chad text. I don't think we even knew about her relationship with Chad. So you're just thinking this is an angry wife whose husband was possibly cheating on her and going on dates. Like, a lot more information came out after that, but and when that other, where I was going with that is when you did see the text between her and Chad going back as far as 2018, and these
Mm-hmm.
little stories back and forth that they had. You're like, and you went so hard on Nancy. Why?
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Like, a hypocrite, right? I know. Thank you.
That was one thing in deliberation that I really liked, because I felt like the text messages we went through really fast, and I felt like we focused on sections of them, which probably makes sense. I mean, it would have taken forever to but we had an actual copy of all of that. So in deliberation, we had someone read them out loud from, like, back in November 2018, and the whole back and forth text, and you really get a visual of the relationship and what was going on.
The love story, the love
The
text,
love story, because
the
she had to
James,
skip through all of that because that got really steamy, and I can see why she wouldn't want to. But yeah,
the James and Elena story, or
yes,
the
yes.
scientific phenomenon of loin fire, says one of the texts, and it's very
Yep.
awkward. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, and I just was like, and you went hard on Nancy because why? Oh, and I liked her comeback going, I went to dinner with him. I didn't sleep with him.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Nancy Joe, well played. Well done.
Yes, definitely.
And she was a friend to him. And you know what? I'm grateful that he had her to talk to. I can't imagine what he was going through, you know?
I can't
So
imagine thinking that you've been ghost and then finding out, was it a year later? I don't know how long later, but realizing what really transpired the day after you last spoke to him.
I can't imagine. I know. And to have those texts on your phone, and to think that the very next day, this man you just met was murdered by his own
Yeah.
family. It's heartbreaking. Um, can you take us to the deliberation room then? You're there, you're reading the love story, and everybody's feeling awkward, but w not everyone was sold on her guilt. We have heard from Carl here at Hidden True Crime, and so we know that. But so can you take us back there, though, with, fellow jurors, and, uh, how you guys came to your verdict?
So we went back on that Monday, and I want to say, was it 3 o'clock? Um, we had instructions to decide who the foreman was going to be.
Mhm.
What was the other instruction? Oh, to give them a schedule as to what hours we wanted to work the next day. Was we staying that day? You know, what we wanted our schedule to be. So we all decided we were ready to call it a day and come back fresh the next day. Um, we voted for the foreman. There was 3 of us that wanted that position. So everybody took a vote. Um, and so that was Monday. So then we came back Tuesday. Um, we took a vote as to where everyone stood. Like, do you have your mind up? Or I don't even think the first vote was, are you leaning towards guilty or not guilty? It was basically, do you know your verdict or do you need more time? So there was
Yeah.
like maybe 4 people that needed more time, 3 or 4. And then after lunch, it was who's voting guilty and who's leaning towards not guilty, or still your mind still isn't made up. There was 1 or 2 people after lunch. And then just out of the blue, I thought it was going to run till Wednesday. I was shocked because it was going on 3 o'clock and we're still having these discussions. And I looked at the time and I was like, we're coming back tomorrow. And then out of the blue, they were like, okay, let's not waste any more time. Let's wrap this up and let's see who's where. And everybody said guilty. And then it like instantly it went to the judge, and we sat there for a good, I want to say 40 minutes waiting for them to call us back into the courtroom. And we read the verdict, and then I told you how we were sent back and the judge came to talk to us. And I was confused, going, what about the sentence? What is she looking at? Why don't we get to hear that?
Yeah.
And then we were advised to look up information before we left the jury room. And then that happened quickly too.
Did you see
Well,
other jurors?
so I
show up?
wasn't able to digest. It all
Okay.
happened like so fast. Like I could have probably sat in that jury, but we all had to walk out together. And I could have probably sat there just trying to take everything in, I don't know, for a good at least 45 minutes or hour.
Yeah.
It was almost like being in shock.
Yeah.
And then I
Yeah.
was just like in panic mode. Like I know when we first walked down, the media tent was like, does anyone want an interview? And we all shook our head no. And the majority of us was like basically taking off running. I had a blister on my foot. There's no way I was going to take off running, but I shook my head and just kind of had my head down. And then it was like hearing a stampede. Carl just happened to be walking at the same pace as me. So he was like right there next to me. And it was like a stampede behind us. And that in itself was overwhelming for me because I was like, I'm trying to digest this. I have how many? It felt like 20 microphones, cameras, phones around me, and they were all at different levels. I didn't know whether to talk to you down there or you right here or you over. Like it was just
Overwhelming.
very overwhelming. I felt better once I got to the curb where I was waiting for the shuttle, and I felt more of like, I felt the kindness and love from you guys that was over there.
Good.
It wasn't like the major news stations. It was
Mhm.
more like, hey, um, how are you feeling? Are you okay? We've been following this, for the last 6 years. We can only imagine, it was more, I just felt kindness. I was still probably shaking like a leaf, and I was still
You were
probably,
shaking.
I felt hives all over my body,
Mhm.
but I at least, I felt love and kindness from that group of ladies,
Good.
which you were a part of.
Yes. I remember that moment. And I just want to say I'm relieved to hear that too, because, certainly, yeah, I was worried about all of you and you. And then I did rethink everything after. I have to be honest, I rethought everything after. I have to think, I make game day decisions and I think, is that okay? But I did. I did want you to know after that, like, look, are you
Yeah,
okay?
you
And
sent me text. Yeah.
yeah. So
It was just a lot to take in. And I really had no desire to be on the news or to be, I really wasn't even ready to talk. I really, because we had the option of talking way earlier from today, but I was just like, I need to take this all in. I need to do my research. And then after that, I just felt like I need a break. Like, I don't want to even talk about this for a whole 5 days at least. Like, I need to get rid of this nausea and this knot in my stomach, which I still have. Who knows when that will go away? I feel very vested in this story as being a part of the trial, um, one of three. And I definitely want to be there when she's sentenced, because that was really extremely like, wait a minute. Like, we found her guilty, but we don't get to see the sentencing, not knowing that there was another trial and that they would sentence her at the end of that one.
yeah,
So the door isn't going to be closed until I hear that.
that makes sense. I know that you're not alone. There are other jurors from her Idaho trial that felt the exact same. And the sentencing in Idaho was actually 5 hours from the trial, because the trial was held in Boise and the sentencing in Rexburg, the East Idaho area. And jurors drove just to be there at the sentencing because it was important to them. So I understand that many understand what you're feeling. Are you going to go to Brandon Boudreaux's trial? I'm sure you know all about Brandon Boudreaux now.
I would like to, however, I'm a single mom. I would need to take PT, take time off from work. I definitely want to be there at the end so that for the sentencing,
Yeah,
which is kind of a gamble because you don't know deliberation if it's going to take one day or multiple days.
sure.
But um, so I plan on being there at the end, and I plan on watching it. I'm assuming they'll stream it on TV.
Yes. Yes, so you'll be able to
So
follow.
yeah,
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
would love to be there every day, but with my schedule, there's no way I can make that happen.
understandable.
So I think the most important would be at the end. And I
Yeah,
really did want to give Kay a hug and just tell her, that she's loved and that, you know, I don't know what the right words is. I just want to hug the lady.
yeah, absolutely. Victoria, I'm so grateful that you were a juror, that you were insightful, you were emotional, but you're also able to put your emotions aside to focus on the law, on the evidence. Um, it was a heavy burden to bear. Um, so thank you. I know that you brought notes to this interview. I know that I'm sure there are things you really want to be able to say. Is there anything else you want to talk about or share?
Oh, they didn't let us take our notes.
Oh, yeah,
Of
tell us about
course.
that. You took
Yeah.
all of
Everything
these
had
notes.
to be shredded afterwards. Um,
You don't have your notes.
so I've kind of just randomly kind of wrote down because right afterwards, everything's such a blur, anyways. So as things come to me, I kind of just write down whatever. And I wanted to be prepared and for questions.
Yeah,
Um, but I don't know, like the key evidence for me was the text history um, between everybody. It was between the whole love story with Chad and Lori. before and after the murder took place. Charles being referred to as Ned, and him changing his insurance plan before we killed him, that whole text.
Mhm.
And that text was when they found out that she was no longer a part of that. The whole text between her and her brother Alex, just supporting a motive. We spoke about the Nephi text. The planning of the mission, those texts between back and forth between her and Mel, and even her and her sister Summer, just updating Lori as to where Adam is and his whole schedule. And so for me, it was really a combination of things. It wasn't like one particular moment. It was just all of it together, which I think is a good thing, because I mean, okay, so I don't know. So there's a motion now that's out, and she's discussing who the detectives testimony being thrown out. I'm like, none of this stuff is relevant with or without his testimony. It was like black and white stuff that I saw of Lori, more so than anything. You know what I'm saying? And it was
Yes.
several things. So I don't care if you remove the detective's testimony or this or that. I still have enough information to prove you guilty. I loved that Trina did the majority of our thinking or support behind, okay, we have this evidence. Where do we link it to which law? Where does it come under words, actions, conduct, motive? She linked all of those. So that was extremely helpful, because I would know I was struggling with that. I had what I felt in my gut, but I wasn't going to convict somebody. I wanted it to be based on evidence.
Yeah.
There's something else. I just lost my train of thought.
When you read guilty, what did Lori do?
She was pretty much stone-faced.
Yeah.
Even when
Just
we individually had to say it, she didn't have much of a reaction. And I think where I was sitting, because I could always see her like behind Trina speaking, and she was kind of just like in my view, like I was constantly watching her whether I wanted to or not, because she was like the background of whoever, every time Trina stood up and spoke.
yeah.
So, and she was very animated, but at the end, nothing.
Nothing. I know. Yeah, that's interesting. We couldn't see her reaction, but I didn't see her head flinch or anything. I saw no head shaking. I didn't see note taking, all her usual reactions. Yeah. So interesting.
Um, yeah, I have a lot of notes, but I think we pretty much touched base on, and I mean, there's so much we could talk about, like the loaded gun being unlocked in a gun case. Why
Yeah.
is that okay, but it's not okay to leave JJ in a running car in the front seat because you're playing games with a phone? Why don't you just give the phone back?
Right.
Why are you not concerned about the gun in your house? Why?
Right.
I mean, it's so many things.
So many. At what point during the trial, it was really hard to hear when you know what happened to JJ. She says, my husband and I, we were just trying to do what was best for our 7-year-old son. There were so many lines like this where for the jurors who might not
That
have
probably
known,
made you guys want to throw up.
for those in the gallery, and think about Kay sitting there, and it was so difficult to hear some of the things she was saying, knowing what we knew.
Well, and I felt really bad for her every time that they would show a picture of Charles laying there or the autopsy or whatever it was. Her head immediately would go down, and she didn't want visual of that.
Yeah, Kay would look down,
That
right.
yeah,
Mhm. As would Jerry and Susan, his
right.
2 other siblings that were there. Yeah,
And Lori was just not. There was no impact. There was no, just nonchalant.
I know.
The famous
Nonchalant.
word.
Yeah.
The drugging him, wanting Alex saying wanting to kill him. Now, Charles went in and wanted to stay for 20 minutes. Well, he stayed for 20 minutes, but her herself had said, no, I don't want you staying here. You can take JJ to Burger King. But then you held his phone and played a phone game with him for more than 20 minutes.
The phone thing is maddening when she talks about what Charles did in a fight they got in. You started it. Just give him his phone back,
Right.
you know?
And you know what else I caught on to? So they had his password was 0000. Well, why was if she had his passcode, why was she holding her phone and stating to him, I want to see your text? If you have somebody's passcode, you'd already have put it in there and be viewing the text. So
Exactly.
did she reset it after he was shot and do like face recognition or whatever, and
Wow.
then got into his phone and changed his password to
It's a
zero
really good
zero
question.
zero?
Yeah, there's a lot on that phone. I think we don't know what happened because she's also desperate to get her own extraction of that phone. There's a lot
Where
on
was
that
the
phone.
text? Where was the horrible text message of him threatening her?
Right, where is that? Right?
Where is
Yeah.
it? Where's the history of him having an issue with domestic violence?
Where
There
is that?
is none.
Right. There isn't. There is evidence of him being very patient and being a
Yeah.
very good dad and
I
right, a
don't think
loyal
there was
husband.
any struggle. I don't think there was any blows and rolling around on the floor. So Alex went from rolling around on the floor to taking a time out and walking back to his bedroom and getting the gun and coming back and using it. Like, huh?
Exactly. And I always point that out. Once you walk away, you're not in harm's way.
Right,
If you can walk away and Lori can leave, there's no self-defense.
right.
And they both talked about leaving the room, you know?
It was just too many unknown, unanswered, no defense. It was just, it wasn't, for me, it was not one particular thing.
Yeah. That makes sense. It was the accumulation of all of the evidence that you looked at the end.
If I have to choose something, it would be the black and white. Here's the communication, here's the text messages. That was more for me than somebody's testimony or anything else.
That was the
But
biggest thing for you.
yeah, But even that, it was multiple text messages. It wasn't just one particular one. It was just the whole, all of it.
Yeah.
So
Anything else? Anything else?
no, hon. I just thank you for being so kind to me.
Oh my
It's been
goodness.
hard.
I can't imagine what you're going through. And look, there are more people I can put you in touch with too. I think there are other jurors from the past trial that would be happy to talk to you too if you're interested and
Yeah,
process with you behind the scenes.
I regret like us jurors not being, probably because it wasn't as long amount of time as Idaho. It was only 2.5 weeks.
Right.
But I would have liked like a better closeness and like, you know, we went through this together. Only us experienced this. But it seems with the Arizona jurors, I've reached out to different people and asking how people are, and there's not been any communication. No one really, it's not like the closeness that I see from the Idaho group of people.
Sure.
It wasn't until after deliberation where I got a piece of paper and I said, we all need to follow up. And like, if want to go together to the sentencing, whatever, and ask for everybody's to put their name and number. And then after everyone's on there, take a picture of it so you can just have everybody's information and
Yeah.
we can follow up with each other. I wasn't referring to during. During it was, yeah, we talked about the weather. We talked about camping. We talked about our kids, our pets.
Things that were safe, right?
Yeah.
That weren't off limits.
Which you would want to do anyways, getting to know, I mean, you're spending day after day with these people, you know. I wish there was more of a connection there.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So that makes me kind of sad.
Well, I'll definitely put you in touch with some people that I know would like to talk to you
Okay.
behind the scenes. And does the state of Arizona offer counseling for any jurors of trials like this? Do you know?
I have no idea, but I know my employer does.
Yeah, what you've been through is a lot. And too, when it comes to trauma, a lot of times when 2 or 3 people experience trauma together, sometimes it makes them closer and other times they isolate. So it could be what's going on with these jurors is,
That's true.
you
That's
know,
true. Yeah,
who
that
knows?
makes sense. And I know that the judge said that he would let us all know about the sentencing, but for some reason, if we don't get that information, please reach out to me when you have like the schedule
Absolutely.
or the information. If, I might see it online somewhere, I don't know, but for now, I'm really trying to give myself a break.
Yeah. Well, look, give yourself a break, but if you need to text me, feel free privately. Anything else you want to say, Victoria, at all?
No, just like I said, thank you for your kindness. Just there's been multiple people that I just felt the love and kindness from them, and I really appreciate it. It was a hard process.
So glad. Well, thank you for being here, and I hope we can perhaps talk soon again. And I am sure I will see you back in Arizona for
Yes.
the next trial.
You have a hug coming to you too.
Thank you, Victoria.